There are so many games that pass me by. I wish I had the time and the money to play every one of them, but I don't, and that sucks. I often look back on some of these games and wonder if I would have liked them or not, and one of those games is the subject of today's video, Deadly Premonition. Now, like most of you, I wrote this game off upon its launch. I didn't have an Xbox 360 at the time, but I do remember it not getting a lot of love. I heard how bad it was, how outdated it was, how clunky and weird it was, and that you should just plain avoid it. So, I did. But as the years went on, I'd hear people talk about how great the game was and how people just didn't get it and refused to just give it a chance. This piqued my interest. I have played plenty of games over the years that sounded bad on paper, but were actually fantastic. For a quick example, Harvest Moon Back to Nature. I remember a lot of people not even giving it a chance because it was, ew, farming. But, I mean, well heck, I was the same way, and then I actually got a chance to play it and my mind shattered because I found myself going from ill farming to maybe I should actually own a farm when I grow up because this is fantastic. I just had to know if this game was good or not, so I decided to give it a fair chance, and eventually the stars aligned, and on one particular Steam sale, I picked up Deadly Premonition because I thought it would make for a neat Halloween video, which I know I'm late on. I am super late on, but hey, as the phrase goes, better late than never. Am I right? I am right. If it was a bad game, we could all just point and laugh at it. And if it was a good game, we could just sit in awe of its majesty. So, which one was it? Good or bad? And more importantly, should you play it? Well, to answer that question, let's take a look at Access Games' 2010 release of Deadly Premonition. Oh, and before I continue to the usual spoiler warning section, there's something I wanted to point out really quickly. The gameplay footage you're seeing is the original Xbox 360 version of the game. I actually did start out on the PC release of it, via Steam as I said on a sale, but that port was broken to hell and back, and I was forced to borrow an Xbox Series S? I think that's what it is. To play the 360 version of it, so I had to re-buy it again. I'll explain more of this a little bit later, but I still wanted to give you a heads up, just in case you were like, this doesn't look like that Steam version of it. But anyway, another thing is that since this game is about, murdering, it may contain things that younger viewers probably should avoid. I guess, I hope. Then again, I was playing Mortal Kombat when I was a kid, so and Grand Theft Auto and watching South Park and all of that stuff, so I can't really judge, but there's some stuff in there that may be not suited to younger viewers. So there you go. And now, now for the classic spoiler warning. I'll be spoiling the whole plot of the game, so if you'd rather just not have the game spoiled for you, don't watch the video, or just skip ahead over to the gameplay section. Either way, you've been warned. So let's get into it. Walking through the forest with your grandchildren should be a wonderful time. Exploring nature, being out in the fresh air, and just spending time with each other. But today won't be one of these wonderful times. As two young boys run further away from their grandfather and into the forest, they come across a horrible sight. The body of a young woman strung up in a tree in an almost ritualistic fashion. She's been murdered, and this murder will rock the nearby town of Greenvale and plunge it into a nightmare. Who killed this woman, and why? FBI Special Agent Francis York Morgan, you have to say it in full, drives towards the town of Greenvale. He's been sent here to help out and look into the murder of the young woman. As he speeds along the raining, fog-filled night road, he talks to his imaginary friend, Zach, who is sort of a stand-in for us, the player, and he talks to Zach a lot, so there you go. Anyway, he's doing all of that while chain-smoking and researching past crimes on his laptop. However, it seems becoming a distracted driver is actually dangerous, and while not paying attention, York almost hits a person in the middle of the road. York swerves to avoid them, but ends up running off the road and flipping his car. Thankfully, he's okay, and after giving an update to Zach on the situation, it's time to go and find some help. Help, however, may be hard to come by because something's wrong. The sky is all blood red and weird. Walking down the forest path, York notices a trail of blood which sadly leads to a dead dog. However, something in the distance catches York's eye. Something is out here, stalking him. York continues further until he reaches a small wooden cabin. Inside the cabin is a rare treat, a can of the pickles, York's favorite. Yum yum. Yum yum. The pickles. I'm serious, it's called the pickles. I don't know why it's called the pickles, but there you go. York takes the can of the pickles and notices a generator. He walks over and turns it on, but when he does, a woman in a dirty dress appears behind him. She must be the owner of the can of pickles and is none too happy that York stole them. She contorts her body strangely and tries to attack York, who is forced to draw his pistol and kill the woman, whose body just melts away into a strange purple cloud. Just what on earth is going on here? York continues deeper into the dark and stormy forest, fighting off strange human-like monsters that York dubs Shadow People. Eventually, he makes his way to the end, but a man in a red raincoat leaps out at him and attacks York with an axe. Thankfully, York is a trained professional and... Well, I guess that was Deadly Premonition. I now kind of understand why people either love this game or hate it. It takes serious guts to just end a game right there. I hadn't even been playing for like 30 minutes, so I mean, that's crazy right there. Also, does anybody ever, fall for this type of joke? No? Just me? Okay. So after successfully avoiding the Axeman's the Axeman's axe tax. After avoiding the Axeman's attacks, York is able to escape and exit the forest as the storm passes. He finds himself out on a public road and decides to follow the road into town. After a little bit of walking and trying and failing to shoot the local wildlife, and even more walking, York is stopped by a young woman who is, quote, easy on the eyes. This is Emily, the sheriff's deputy here in Greenvale. It turns out she and the sheriff were actually out looking for York, who of course was late. Emily explains that the sheriff went off in search for York by himself while she stayed behind to wait on the main road. As York and Emily get to know each other a little bit better, the sheriff George Woodman returns. After some introductions, George makes it perfectly clear he doesn't want the FBI's help with the case. Still, York politely tells George that He isn't here to take over the case, just here to watch. This somewhat puts George at ease, but not too much. After updating Zach on the situation, the gang heads into town to drop off York at his hotel. As York sleeps that night, he finds himself in a strange dream. He's in a red room filled with red leaves, some furniture, and a door. After a little exploring around the room, York opens the door and enters into a long hallway. He slowly makes his way down the hallway to another door at the end. However, as he walks closer, a young boy calls out to him. York stops, turns, and looks at the child, but as he does, a strange shadow appears behind him. The boy runs to York and tells him to hold his breath because the shadow people can't see you if you're holding your breath. York indeed holds his breath, and the two very slowly sneak their way past the shadow person and to the door at the other end of the hallway. Once at the door, the young boy opens it and a bright light washes over York, and then he wakes up in his hotel room. What a strange dream, right, Zach? After getting ready and having some breakfast with the hotel manager, Polly, York decides to have his favorite beverage, coffee. As he pours the milk into his coffee, he notices something. The letters F and K. It's a clue for sure. Thank you, coffee, you're amazing. Never steers you wrong, coffee does. Coffee. With breakfast out of the way, York heads on over to the Greenvale Sheriff's Department to get started on the case. While waiting in the Sheriff's Department, York meets with Thomas, the Sheriff's assistant, and Thomas has a run that would put Steven Seagal to shame, but that aside, he's truly been affected by the murder in this town and wants to help York solve this case. He's a nice guy. And speaking of the case, it's now time to head to the office room and get started. The victim was Anna Graham, 18 years old and fresh out of high school with big dreams of making it as a model in the big city. She lived with her mother in the town, and both seemed to live a mostly quiet and normal life. Now, this is great information to get started with and all, but York is more interested in a biscuit Thomas made. York praises Thomas on his cooking abilities, and just as York is about to take another bite of this delicious buttery biscuit, George enters the office. George explains that the autopsy results for Anna are now ready and over at the local hospital. So George, Emily, and York hop into the police cruiser as it begins to rain and speed on over to the hospital. And hey, don't worry, even though it's heavily raining right now, these are trained professionals, so don't try this at home, okay? It's not okay to speed in the rain. Okay? Okay. Inside the hospital, our wonderful trio head over to the reception desk and speak with one of the nurses there. Freckly Fiona. Jeez. Freckly Fiona, and let her know that they're there to speak with the head doctor, Usher, about Anna's autopsy report. Why did I write this script? Is so bad. There's so many weird tongue twisters. Oh. Fiona lets the group know that the doctor is most likely in the computer room. This confuses York as he just can't wrap his mind around computers inside of a hospital. I personally agree with him. Technology in hospitals is nothing short of sickening. I want to see a return to the old ways. Leeches, amputations for stubbing your toe, and of course, pretending that bacteria doesn't exist. I miss those times. Gosh, I really do. But I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic here. Once York has accepted modern technology in hospitals, the group finally head in... I need to go on a vacation. You guys want to join me? I've lost my mind. I've barely started and I've already lost the plot. Okay, let's just go on a vacation really quick. Oh, man. Peaceful. Peaceful and just relaxing. Just listen to those waves. Okay, let's get back to it. Once York has finally accepted modern technology in hospitals, the group thank Fiona and head on over to the computer room to find the doctor. However, Usher isn't there. It seems the good doctor wanted to play a game and test York's intelligence, and let me tell you that York passes that test with flying colors. His reward is Usher's location, which is down in the morgue. I mean, where else would he be? We came for an autopsy report, so... I mean, of course he's there. He's not in the birthing ward. Birthing ward? What's the place where people give birth to children? The birthing ward. The birth ward. The baby delivery ward. What is it? It's... whatever. It's not the point. The point is, the group go down to the morgue and finally meet up with Usher, who is impressed with York's amazing skills. Still, this isn't the time or place for two bros to express their admiration for their big brains or mind-bending puzzles. We have a job to do. Usher gets to work and gives us the autopsy report. Anna's cause of death was blood loss due to a stab wound. We also know that she was gripping some sort of object in her hand so hard it left a strange imprint. Almost like a peace sign, but in reverse. We also know that she was more than likely killed inside, since around the time of death it was raining heavily and her makeup would have washed off. After the report, Usher begins to explain what he believes the killer's motives might be, but York isn't having any of... That was a helicopter. Very nice. I'm leaving that in. It's already... the script is already off the rails, so... just leave it in. Anyway, York is the profiler here. It's his job to figure out the killer's motives and what makes him tick. And with that, York begins to take a closer look at the body. And what he discovers is that Anna most likely knew her killer, since she didn't appear to be restrained in any sort of a way or put up much of a fight. And it also appears that the killer bit out Anna's tongue, which tells York that the killer is a passionate person, especially with women. While examining Anna's mouth, York also notices something in there. So he uses a tool to pick out whatever it is, and what it is a small red seed. And without any hesitation, he informs everybody that this case has just become under the jurisdiction of the FBI. York also explains that he's actually been tracking a series of murders across the United States, and that each victim had one or more of these red seeds, so the plot thickens. York steps outside the morgue to have a smoke when he begins to notice something strange. The hospital doesn't look right. In fact, things appear to be like they were back when he crashed his car. York slowly makes his way through the hospital, fighting shadow people who are all no doubt after his can of the pickles. Eventually, York makes his way to the exit and escapes whatever strange world he was in. George, Emily, and York get ready. By the way, it just ends right there. I'm not skipping anything. He's just back in reality. There you go. George, Emily, and York get ready to leave the hospital when a strange man in a wheelchair and wearing a gas mask approaches the group, along with what appears to be his caretaker. This is Harry Stewart, a mysterious man who owns half of the town and almost never talks to anybody. And the man with him is Michael, Mr. Stewart's aide. Mr. Stewart whispers into Michael's ear, and Michael relays the message to York. The message is nothing more than a riddle, and after that, the two men leave. As the group discuss how weird that was, Emily gets a call on her radio. It's Thomas. It turns out he was able to get the people who first found the body in the forest to head back on over to the crime scene for a little bit of a meet and greet. York is thrilled at this, and the group heads off. Over at the crime scene, George, Emily, and York meet with the two boys who first found the body, Isaac and Isaiah, and their grandfather, Jim. And what we learn from these two boys isn't all that much. They didn't see anything important, and in fact, can't seem to truly grasp what it was that they did see, as they believe Anna to be some sort of fairy of the forest, a goddess, if you will. They believed she was happy and smiling. If only that were true. After questioning the boys, York steps away from the group to have a good look around the crime scene, and what does he find? Well, he finds some new clues. A broken stiletto heel, a man wearing a vest, and the vest has a hole in the back, and it appears he has some sort of reverse peace mark? The same sort of mark left from the object that Anna held. He also finds a rusted piece of metal, and finally, some imprints that were left on the ground at the foot of the tree Anna was put in. York takes these clues and is able to more or less reconstruct the events. It would appear that the killer, after hanging Anna in the tree, knelt down and prayed to her, but for what reason, we don't know. After that, the killer left behind a small piece of metal and fled the scene. Later, somebody wearing stiletto heels found Anna's body, left the photo of the man wearing the vest, and then took whatever object Anna had in her hand and ran away, snapping her heel as they ran. Sadly, these clues don't mean much right now, but it brings us one step closer to solving the mystery. However, when York asks George and Emily if they might know who it was that was wearing the heels, George points to Diane, the owner of the art gallery here in town, which is good for us because it gives us some sort of direction, but not as much as the tiny piece of metal gives us. George and Emily both conclude that it must have come from the old lumber mill. It's possible that this was the true site of the murder, and so the gang hop into the car and speed on over to the old lumber mill. Now, remember, Zach, these are trained professionals who are allowed to put the pedal to the metal while it's pouring down rain. They have spent years honing their skills to avoid crash. Okay, never mind. At the old lumber mill, York gets ready to head inside. However, he tells Emily and George to stay outside. This upsets the two officers, and rightly so, but York counters, telling them that to him, everybody in this town is a suspect, which, let's be real here, that makes perfect sense. After that, York heads inside and makes a wisecrack to Zach, but as he does, York notices something isn't right again. It appears the horde of shadow people are hell-bent on punishing York for taking that can of the pickles, because as you know, it wasn't just a can of pickles, it was a can of the pickles, and that is a big difference, Zach. York slowly makes his way through the twisted passages of the old lumber mill, and eventually reaches the site of the murder. This is where Anna was killed. The whole area is dressed up in an almost ritualistic fashion. Sadly, there aren't enough clues right here and right now to piece together the series of events, so we must explore deeper to find what we're looking for. As York begins to gather the clues, he gets locked in a small room with a ringing phone. York answers the phone, and to his surprise, it's the killer, and he's taunting York. After that, he hangs up, leaving York more or less the same as he normally is. Still, he isn't wasting time here, and with the exit now clear, he proceeds further in, blasting shadow monsters left and right and collecting more clues. That is until the killer finds York. It's the same guy in the raincoat as before. He swings his axe, but York leaps out of the way. Then the killer turns, waggles his finger, and pieces out. I don't know why he didn't stand and fight, but yep, okay, sure. York shrugs and continues forward. With most of the clues found, York heads into a room with another ringing phone. And just who is it, you might be asking? Well, Zach, I'll tell you. It's the Raincoat Killer himself, calling us to taunt us again. However, this isn't the old is your fridge running prank phone call. Oh, no. This is the...
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You know, that kind of phone call. Only, more sinister. Anyway, after that, the killer starts hacking and slashing his way inside the room, and with no way out, York quickly hides. Soon, the killer is inside the room, slowly stalking around, trying to sniff out York's cheap cologne. However, York does the old hold your breath trick, which of course hides your scent no matter how much cheap cologne you bathe yourself in. And you know what, Zach? It works. It actually worked. The Raincoat Killer gives up the hunt for York, even though he knows York is in that room somewhere with nowhere to go. What luck! Once the coast is clear, York exits his hiding spot, and just kidding, it was all a trick. The Raincoat Killer only pretended to leave. York now has no choice but to run, and run fast, Sonic style. Eventually, York is able to escape the clutches of the Raincoat Killer and make it to safety outside, along with the clues that he needs to piece together more of this mystery. York shows the evidence he found to George and Emily and confirms to them that this was indeed the place that Anna was killed. He shows them a piece of the raincoat he was able to get from the Raincoat Killer inside. This intrigues Emily, who explains to York that nobody in town actually wears a raincoat, since they all refuse to go outside when it rains. Emily goes on to explain that she actually has no idea why people in the town do that, since she moved here into town in high school. But thankfully, old grumpy local boy George can shed a light on this. He explains that it's all because of some local folklore about a killer in a bright red raincoat who only appears when it's raining. George believes that it's all nonsense, but the people in the town still treat it like tradition and go as far as to shut down all the shops and schools so everybody can stay indoors. After that story from George, York turns to both George and Emily and tells the both of them to show him their backs. This, of course, confuses the two, but York explains that this killer has some sort of upside-down peace symbol on their back, and so, to rule them out as suspects, he wants to see their backs. Now, George, of course, is rather upset about this, especially since Emily is a female officer, but Emily herself explains that it's alright, and then proceeds to show York her back, and sure enough, she's cleared as a suspect. As for George, well, he's cleared as a suspect, however, His back is covered in scars. A whole heck of a lot of scars, actually. When York naturally asks George about the scars, he shuts down the conversation, explaining that it's a private matter. York nods his head and drops the subject. With that out of the way, York feels it's best to gather the townsfolk together and not only meet them, but also update them all on the recent news. But that can wait till tomorrow. Right now, it's time to end the day and rest the mind. After all, a rested mind is a productive mind. Wouldn't you agree, Zach? The next day, York heads directly over to the local community center / town hall. However, it's far too early, and to pass the time, York pulls some sweet Tokyo Drift moves in the parking lot. I mean, look at these moves! This is some serious Need for Speed Underground type moves right here. I mean, whee! Oh yeah! Oh jeez. Sorry, Jim. Hey, Zach, remind me to later send a DVD copy of Tokyo Drift and a can of the pickles over to Jim as an apology of sorts. I'm pretty sure he'll love that. Eventually, after a little bit more drifting and time passing, everybody turns up to the local community center, and York heads inside to speak with the townsfolk. On stage, York introduces himself to the townsfolk and gives them all a rundown on the progress of the investigation so far. He lets everybody know that in his experience, these types of murders tend to happen again, and as such, he wishes to warn and advise everybody here today. York warns to avoid going outside when it's raining, especially young women, as the killer seems to be mimicking the town's folklore. While he's talking, a woman walks into the auditorium. York asks Emily who the fashionably late one is, and Emily explains that it's Carol, Thomas's sister, and that she owns a bar here in town. With the interruption over, York returns to talking with the townsfolk and assuring them that the killer will be found and brought to justice. However, until then, he reminds everybody to stay on guard and report anything suspicious. After York finishes up, and as everybody is about to get up and leave, the town's reclusive, rich resident Mr. Stewart, along with his aide, go to the front row and give a cryptic speech about honor, purple fog, paying for sins, and wandering in hell. You know, the normal type of speech. And with that out of the way, York explains to Zach that he wants to take a quick moment to do a meet and greet with the people here before everybody leaves, and so that's exactly what he does. The town of Greenvale is home to a lot of quirky characters, so let's super quickly gloss over them all, shall we? There's the General. He owns the scrapyard in town and is a bit of a grumpy person. There's Fiona and Usher, whom we've already met, the town nurse and doctor respectively. Keith and Lily Ingram, the parents of the twins who found the body, Isaac and Isaiah, and they also own the local general store, the Milk Bar. Wesley, the owner of the gun store in town. Nick and Olivia Cormack, owners of the diner in town, the same diner Anna worked at before her unfortunate passing. Polly, the owner of the hotel we're staying at. Roaming Sigourney, aka the Pot Lady. She is, she's not quite all there, if you catch my meaning. She likes to talk to her pot and believes her pot can talk to her, so there you go. Old Jimmy Boy, whom we've already met and I owe a DVD copy of Tokyo Drift to. Gina and Jack, the owners of the, from what I can tell anyways, only gas station in town. Carol, the bar owner who interrupted the town meeting earlier and is also Thomas's sister. The gravekeeper Brian, who is a little weird as well. Father and son, Richard and Quint Dunn. Richard is another local bar owner, so this town has 2 bars, and Quint works there to help his father out. But Quint is also a friend of Anna and dated Anna's best friend, Becky, who, as a side note, isn't here at the town meeting. And I think that's about everybody, more or less. I mean, a few people didn't show up, like Becky, Anna's best friend, Anna's mother, and Diane, the owner of the local art gallery, who is out of town right now, and possibly the woman who broke her heel at Anna's body. One of these people here today is Anna's killer, but who? Well, from what we can see, the only suspicious people here are Carol, Thomas's sister, who is without a doubt hiding something, and Nick and Olivia Cormack, the diner owners. Now, Olivia was rather open, but you could tell something was bothering her. However, her husband, Nick, was extremely standoffish and hostile. He is hiding something. We'll have to keep a close eye on everybody here today, right, Zach? For now, our job here is done, so we decide to grab a bite to eat with our police pals, George, Emily, and Thomas, and hopefully get to know them just a little bit better. At the local diner in town, George tells York that this murder is, without a doubt, the worst thing he has ever seen. Greenvale pretty much has no crime, and what little it does is nothing more than some high schoolers doing the old 5-finger discount, or perhaps a drunken brawl, but nothing like murder. Emily's curiosity gets the better of her, and she asks York what are some of the cases that he's worked on. York explains that he's dealt with things that aren't much different from what George mentioned. You know, simple things like... Oh heck, let's just hear it from York himself, shall we?
The case I was on until last month, well, the guy killed 7 girls in a 3-month period. He sawed their heads off from the neck and took them back to his house. He cleaned the skulls up and used them as utensils in his daily life, to eat from or as a urine cup. He hated women. That was his way of dealing with it. He'd fill skulls with ice, cola, and rum, then he'd down it in one gulp. For him, that was a holy ritual. The question of his mental state was the pivotal point in the court case.
Oh, man.
For me, he was insane. 100%. Drinking from the skulls, well, that is one thing. But those he had used to relieve himself, he would then just use them to drink from, too. Yeah, that was too much for me. It's just not sanitary.
Not sanitary. That's probably not the problem for most of us.
What else? Ah, yes. An ingenious law school student raped over 800 victims. That was a nasty one.
Thank you, Agent York. Now, let's talk about something else.
You don't want to hear anymore? That's a shame, isn't it, Zach? I was just about to get to the good part, too.
See? Normal, mundane stuff. Shame we won't ever get to hear the good part, though. Still, at the end of the day, the group reflects on how awful this crime is and how it's shaken this small town to its core. After dinner, the group head home and York returns to his hotel room to go over the case so far. So, shall we recap as well, Zach? What we know so far is that Anna was killed inside the sawmill during a rainstorm. When the storm was finished, her body was moved and tied up in a tree in a ritualistic fashion. We also know that she died of bloodloss and that her tongue was bitten out by the killer. We also found 3 important things at the crime scene. Prints that show the killer knelt in the grass before leaving, tracks that show somebody else found the body, took something from the palm of Anna's hand and then left a photo of the killer's back, which has some sort of reverse peace symbol on it. And then when the person was done, they fled the scene, breaking a stiletto heel as they left. We also know that the killer likes to wear a red raincoat and wield an axe, as he is copying the town's folklore. As for current leads, all we have now is Miss Stiletto Heel, of whom we believe is Diane, the owner of the art gallery. As for suspicious people, we have Carol McLean, Thomas's sister, and Nick Cormack, the owner of the local diner Anna worked at. These two seem to be hiding something. The pieces of this puzzle are slowly coming together. As York sleeps that night after reviewing the details thus far, he dreams of a red room with Anna serving us a coffee, Becky, Anna's best friend, and the twins, or at least some strange version of them anyways. The twins insist on us drinking the coffee before we leave. York does what they ask and drinks the coffee and leaves. But as he does, he bumps into that strange little boy from earlier who taught us to hold our breath to hide from the shadow people. As York gets closer, he realizes that this little boy is actually him back when it happened, and what it is, we don't know yet, as York suddenly wakes up. York lights up a smoke and thinks to himself that somehow, some way, this case might actually be related to him. What a wild night, eh, Zach? As York heads out of his hotel room, he bumps into another guest. A big man carrying a small plant along with his dog. This is Forrest Kaysen, a traveling sapling salesman, which I've never heard of in my life, but he seems to already know about York, calling him the Agent Scarface everybody has been talking about. York doesn't seem to care about that name, but still thinks that he'd need a bigger facial scar to live up to that name. Forrest explains that he comes by Greenvale every so often, as he treats it like a vacation of sorts. And speaking of his job, Forrest hands York a tree sapling as a sort of gift for their meeting, and explains that it's a special type of tree that only he can grow. York thanks the man and the two part ways. However, York notices something. FK. The letters that his coffee warned him about. Forrest Kaysen. The plot thickens even thickery. Thick. It becomes thicker. York, George, and Emily all meet up at the local art gallery to speak with the owner, Diane, who was out of town until today. York decides to meet this woman on his own and tells George and Emily to stay outside, and the two reluctantly agree, and York heads inside. Inside, the gallery is huge and impressive, with floors that almost appear to be made of marble. Amazing! While York admires the building, he notices something in the corner of his eye. Olivia, the diner owner. She exits a room, seemingly upset about something, and York walks over to talk with her. Olivia is startled by York, and York asks Olivia if she likes art, and the woman explains that she likes trees. I like turtles. I like trees! This confuses York for a moment, but as he quickly glances around, he notices that all the paintings within the gallery are that of trees. Strange art gallery? He puts two and two together and asks if she comes by often to the gallery to look at the trees. Olivia shakes her head and explains that she only comes by sometimes, and after that, she quickly leaves. That was weird. Anyway, York makes his way through the massive gallery and eventually reaches Diane's office, but before he goes inside, he overhears two women screaming at each other. York listens in and overhears one of the women saying that she's taking it with her because she can put it to better use. York leans in a little bit closer, only to have the door swing open and Carol to angrily storm out and away, not paying much attention to York at all. As she storms away, Diane welcomes York in. She explains that there's no way she could have been at the crime scene since she was out drinking with Nick Cormack until early in the morning, and he can back up that statement. York asks Diane what exactly the argument he overheard was about. She explains that Carol has always been like that, always yelling at her about something and treating her as some sort of enemy, and that it must stem from the fact that she's more than likely slept with somebody Carol had her eye on. And before York can ask who the lucky person might have been, Diane then offers to sleep with York. Boy, that escalated quickly. York turns down Diane's offer, and after that, York heads outside and has a little chat with George and Emily. He explains that Diane said she was out with Nick at the time of the murder, and that they should head off to the diner to speak with Nick about this and confirm Diane's story. George agrees, but tells York and Emily he has to return to the office, so he'll leave the questioning up to them. At the diner, York and Emily head inside and decide to grab a quick bite to eat before speaking with Nick, so Olivia takes their order. York chooses the daily special and a cup of coffee, and Emily chooses a T-bone steak since the FBI is paying for the meal. Just then, Mr. Stewart and his aide turn up and explain that they're there to pick up Mr. Stewart's lunch, which is 1 turkey, strawberry jam, and cereal sandwich. York overhears the strange lunch and tells Emily that it sounds like the sinner's sandwich, and that Mr. Stewart must be eating it to atone for past sins. However, Mr. Stewart actually overhears that and suggests that York try the sandwich for himself since it's actually very delicious. And you know what? York takes him up on the offer and tries a bite of Mr. Stewart's sinner's sandwich. And, well, I'll just play the scene.
I can't believe it. This is fantastic. It's really good. Olivia, I'm sorry, but can I change my order? I'll have what Harry is having.
Okay, I gotta pause it right here and say something. When I first played this game, it was around this moment when I actually started to get the game, so to speak. Up until now, I wasn't even sure if I'd actually end up finishing the game or that I'd even make a video about it. But this stupid sandwich and the weird faces and the music and sometimes lack of music, it all just sort of came together. And perhaps the weirdness is rubbing off on me because I decided to actually try the sinner's sandwich for real. I actually wanted to make it and actually try this stupid sandwich. And since it, well, as of the recording of this, you know, Thanksgiving was yesterday and I was kind of hoping to get the doesn't matter. The point is, fresh turkey was there and I thought, you know what, screw it, let's actually try it. And what's my honest opinion? Will I have the same reaction as York or regret my life choices? Well, let's find out together, shall we? Well, there it is. That's the sinner sandwich right there. I made it. Fresh turkey. I added lettuce and mayonnaise, I guess. Strawberry jam, cereal, but it always looked like cornflakes, I guess. The cat is scratching the couch. There's turkey in there. That's it. It's as simple as it is. A turkey cereal and strawberry jam sandwich. So let's give it a try. Could be good, could be bad, but let's try it. Hang on, gotta take it off camera. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. I can't really taste the strawberry jam. The cereal adds crunch. I can taste the turkey. I mean, it's not blowing me away, but it's not bad. Surprisingly, it's not bad. So there you go, the Cinna sandwich. All right, there you go. There you go. I actually tried the Cinna sandwich for real. So let's just continue on with the story now, shall we? Oh, boy. After lunch, York strolls on over to Nick to question him about Diane's whereabouts at the night of the murder, to see if the two of them really were out drinking, and it turns out they were. Nick explains that he and Diane like to talk about art, which makes sense given the fact that she owns and runs an art gallery. However, even with this new information, York still believes that he and Diane are hiding something, so he questions Nick's wife, Olivia. She, too, confirms the story. In fact, it seems Nick and Diane often go out drinking together and talking about art. Apparently, Nick is a really big lover of art. Olivia confesses that she isn't able to share her husband's passion for art, so she understands why he likes to go off and talk to Diane so much about it. It's just at that moment when York notices something. Olivia isn't a fan of art, so why was she at the art gallery earlier? York rightly suspects Olivia was actually there to speak with Diane, and Olivia refuses to discuss the matter right now and tells York and Emily to meet her around the back of the diner after it closes. Well, she's hiding something, Zach, so let's find out what it could be. York returns to the diner later that night, pulling up to the back of the diner the only way he knows how. Nice drifting skills, boy. So, it turns out Olivia was sort of lying. She explains to York and Emily that, for the most part, she is fine with her husband, Nick, hanging out with Diane. She wasn't lying about being unable to discuss art with him. However, she began to suspect Nick of being unfaithful. He, of course, denied any wrongdoing, but she still worried, so one night she decided to follow Nick. Nick went to the bar and did indeed meet up with Diane, and the two stayed there for some of the night. At some point, the two decided to leave the bar and drive to the art gallery, and when Olivia followed them, Olivia got a little bit scared Diane had spotted her and decided to leave and went home. The next day, Anna's body was found. She turns to York and tells him that the reason he found her at the art gallery was because she wanted to go and confront Diane about her husband's infidelity, but couldn't summon the courage and left. Nick really has been seeing Diane every single night since, and in fact, he's gone to see her again tonight. And it's at that moment Emily's radio crackles to life. It's George. He tells both York and Emily that he just got word something strange is happening over at Becky's house, Anna's best friend. Her boyfriend Quint just called it in. But that wasn't all. Apparently Quint said the words "raincoat killer." Olivia, overhearing the radio call, begins to cry in fear of her husband Nick being the killer. As it begins to rain, York tells Emily to stay with Olivia as he goes to Becky's house to investigate. York speeds through the stormy streets, praying he isn't too late. At Becky's house, York finds Thomas looking after a crying Quint. York orders Thomas to stay with Quint while he goes inside. Thomas looks at York and begs him to stay and wait for backup, but York tells Thomas not to worry because he has Zach. And with that, York steps inside Becky's house. York makes his way through the house until he eventually reaches her bedroom and the grisly sight in the bathroom. He was too late. The raincoat killer has claimed a second victim. York looks at Becky tied up with wire in a strange fashion. However, as he lights up a smoke, Becky springs to life and begins to mumble words but can't get anything out because her tongue has been bitten out as well. York turns to her as George, Emily, and Thomas burst into the bathroom. With no time to waste, George tries to cut the wires to get her down. York screams for him to stop, but it's far too late. George cuts the wire, setting off the trap that kills Becky on the spot. York stares at Becky as her arm begins to rise. York turns to see what she's pointing at, and it's the spirit of Anna who reaches out for her friend Becky. Just then, York snaps back to reality as Becky coughs up a bunch of red seeds and a key? As everybody takes a moment of silence to deal with what just happened, York picks up the key and notices that it's for a safe. He searches around Becky's bedroom and indeed finds a safe hidden behind a painting. He opens it up and finds a notebook. Emily walks over to York as York opens the book to the last page. It's blank, but York knows what to do. He uses a pencil to lightly trace over the page, slowly revealing oh wait, that's the wrong scene. Okay, my bad. He reveals a letter. In the letter, Becky confesses to a sister that she was there the night Anna was killed, and in fact was there while she was being killed, but rather than help, decided to run away because she knew he wanted to kill her when he was finished with Anna. Becky refused to let him get away with what he had done, so she decided to follow him when he was finished with Anna. She followed him all the way out to the woods and watched him tie Anna up to a tree and try and pry something out of Anna's hand, but failed to do so. After the killer left, Becky went to Anna's body and was able to take what she was holding in her hand, almost like Anna wanted her to have it. What she held was a locket belonging to the killer that she must have grabbed when she was sadly being killed. Becky took this locket and gave it to the twins, telling them to give it to her sister because she knew, Becky, that if she left the house, the killer would get her. Becky then also confesses that she broke the heel of her sister's shoe and apologizes for it. After reading the letter, York turns to Emily, now knowing that Becky was Miss Stiletto Heel. He also asks Emily who this sister might be, and Emily tells York that Becky and Diane are actually sisters. We need to find that locket Becky gave to the twins to give to Diane. It is the key to this whole mystery. But with everything that just happened, it's most likely for the best that everybody just go home and try to rest for the night. The next day, York heads over to the Milk Barn, a convenience store owned by the Ingrams, the parents of the twin boys, and the workplace of Becky. York breaks the news about Becky to the twins' parents, and they are of course saddened and tell York that they took the twins over to Becky's house after Anna's body was found to hopefully cheer her up a little bit. York explains that while they were there, Becky gave something important to the twins and that he needs to talk to them about it. The parents explain that the boys are actually out with Kaysen right now, who is apparently a family friend, and that they're up spending the day in the forest playing with his dog. So, York and Emily hop into the Driftmobile and speed on over to the forest to speak with the twins, and hopefully get to the bottom of what happened with that locket. After arriving and trying to pull off York's signature drift move that the game won't let me do, for some reason, we find the twins, who are indeed playing around with Kaysen's Dalmatian. And by the way, I just want to point out that this scene is absolutely hilarious. I actually laughed a lot when I saw this scene, and I just gotta take a quick second to break it all down for you, so you can enjoy the weirdness of this game in a segment I'll call Lycan's Extreme Scene Breakdown Show. Yeah, okay, that's perfectly fine. Okay, let's get into it real quick. Okay, so here I am driving up to the location, pulling off a sweet drift move right there. Here we go, I'll pull off another one, ready? Game didn't let me do it. Right, so here we go, black screen. Right, okay, so York says, according to Lily, Isaac and Isaiah should be here, right? Emily says, let's go find them, right? Perfect, right? There they are. There they are. Alright, we found them. Hi. Oh, God. It's so stupid. Oh, because they were there. Where could they be, Emily? Oh, I don't know, York. Where could they be? I found them. I have spotted the children. There they are, Emily. Oh, I'm an FBI agent. Oh, jeez. Okay, perfect. Nothing escapes York's eagle eyes. Perfect. Oh, anyway. Just so dumb. Oh, okay, okay, that's the scene breakdown over. Let's get back to the damn video. Oh, perfect. Where was I? York and Emily ask the twins about what it was Becky gave them, and they confirm that Becky did give them a box to give to Diane. However, on their way, they bumped into Carol, and she offered to take it off of their hands and deliver it herself to Diane. But the boys refused because they made a promise. This upset Carol. The boys explain that they upheld their promise and gave Becky's box to Diane. It's at that moment York starts to put the pieces together. It's also when I became a little confused. You see, York explains that this box contained the locket belonging to the killer, and that the locket was taken by Carol, because that's what the argument he overheard at the art gallery was all about. However, York turns to Kaysen to confirm that this was indeed what happened, since apparently Kaysen was in the room while the argument was happening. York says, I saw you there. And that's the part that confused me, because I don't remember seeing Kaysen at the art gallery at all. I saw Olivia at the art gallery. I saw Diane at the art gallery. I saw Carol at the art gallery, but no Kaysen. I didn't see Kaysen at all. And so I was so confused, I actually stopped the game after this cutscene, and I went back to look through my footage to see if Kaysen was actually there. But either I didn't get the cutscene, or he just vanished out of the cutscene, or something, because he wasn't in the cutscene. So I was just really confused, especially when Kaysen was like, right after this moment, Kaysen just says, oh yeah, I was there, and I did see Carol take the locket from Diane, and yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I don't know why I had felt the need to point that out, but I did. Anyway, after that, York explains to Kaysen that he's now part of the suspect list, and that he's not allowed to leave town. After that, Emily and York return to the police station and go over everything with everyone, so everyone's caught up on the situation. It seems a lot of this case revolves around Nick and Diane, but mostly Diane. So, since the two of them drink with each other each night, York decides that we should follow them and see what they do. York tells Emily to follow Nick, George to follow Diane, and Thomas to just be inside his sister's bar and watch the two while they're inside. And if anything strange happens, we'll be able to catch them in the act. Looks like we've got a good old-fashioned stakeout. Later that night, York sits in the Driftmobile just outside the bar. Emily, after tailing Nick from the diner to the bar, joins York in the car. However, after a few hours, Thomas radios in from the bar, telling them that Nick is leaving and that Diane wasn't with him. In fact, she never even came to the bar that night. York turns to Emily and asks her to radio George to confirm that she hadn't even left the art gallery, and George confirms that. As Nick leaves the bar and gets into his car, York, Emily, and now Thomas decide to follow him to see where he goes. And after a very long and very slow drive through the pouring rain that I had to redo because the game crashed, and then redo again because the loading screen just wouldn't load the next cutscene, York and the gang eventually lose sight of Nick after they almost crash their car. Still, we were close to the art gallery and they decide to head there. At the art gallery, the gang meets up with George, who explains that Nick hasn't arrived yet and that Diane is still inside and hasn't left. However, old Grumpy Pants George seems to be acting a little strange, and York is quick to point that out and asks George what's wrong with him. George confesses that he's a little stressed out since this is his first murder case and all, so he may have had a drink or two while staking out the gallery. However, that he is still in control. York smiles, and the group try to enter the gallery. However, it's locked up tight, so everybody splits up to look for a way inside as the rain continues to pour down. Eventually, York and Emily are able to find an underground tunnel, for some reason, that leads inside the art gallery. York tells Emily to stay behind as he ventures down the tunnel and into the gallery. I guess it was a good call too, since everything becomes screwed up again. The world turns twisted and strange, and shadow people attack York at every single turn, especially this really annoying new enemy. But our man York isn't a pushover and continues forward until he's able to get inside the gallery. Once inside, York finds Nick unconscious on the ground, but that isn't all. He finds Diane's body held high in the air with cables, her blood dripping down on the sculpture below. York turns to unlock the front door and let the others inside. Once inside, they quickly secure the area, and that's when Emily notices that Diane is actually still alive and is actually about to fall and be impaled on the sculpture below. York runs up the staircase as George tries to push the sculpture out of the way, but they're out of time, and York leaps off the top of the staircase to catch Diane in midair. George gives up on moving the sculpture and readies himself to catch York and Diane, and you know what? He actually does it! George, you absolute legend, you! As York and George pick themselves up off the ground, they notice that Diane, in spite of all her injuries, has also gotten up. She seems to be in a state of shock as she begins to show off and discuss the sculpture she was almost impaled on. However, her words are mumbled and muted since she too has had her tongue removed. She spits up blood and red seeds with each word. It's at that moment Nick regains consciousness and is placed under arrest by George for the attempted murder of Diane. However, Nick flips out and pushes George backwards and into the sculpture behind him. The cables holding the piece in place buckle and snap, sending the whole thing crashing down on top of Emily, Diane, and York. Thankfully, York was able to push Emily out of the way and they're fine, but Diane isn't so lucky as the sculpture landed directly on top of her, killing her instantly. As everybody recovers from the shock of what just happened, Kaysen's dog suddenly comes walking through the front door, passing everybody like nothing is wrong. York, sensing something isn't right here, of course, follows the dog further inside the gallery and eventually to a rear room which appears to be Diane's bedroom or something. And inside the room, behind a bookcase, is a secret room with a trap door with none other than Kaysen shouting out for help. And I guess this trap door goes to the basement? I guess? I have no idea. Anyway, York shoots off the lock and frees Kaysen. And Kaysen explains that he and Diane had been seeing each other for a while now, and tonight was no different. However, while they were together, somebody came to visit Diane, and so she locked up Kaysen in the basement to avoid a fight with whomever came to visit. She never came back to let him out, of course. But he did hear somebody walking around above him, which was clearly a man and not Diane, so he stayed quiet. After a little bit more time passed, Kaysen got sick of waiting, so he let his dog out the basement window, I guess, to hopefully get somebody's attention to let him out. York informs Kaysen that Diane was killed and that he's still on the suspect list. However, Kaysen fires back and tells York that he couldn't have done it since he was locked up in the basement. And I guess that makes sense, right, Zach? Everybody returns to the police station. Nick is locked up, Emily is still in shock, George is depressed and feels like he was responsible for not only Becky's death, but now Diane's. Still, no matter how you look at it, the killer has taken another life. As York prepares to head back to the hotel for the night, George approaches him, his tone of voice far less angry than usual. He tells York that there's something he'd like to get off his chest, and if it would be alright if they went out to the bar for a few drinks and to talk. York agrees since he could use a drink, and the two head out. At the bar, George opens up to York about a lot of things, namely the scar on his cheek and the ones on his back. He tells York that his mother used to hit him when he was a child with something she'd call tree punishment, in which she would take a branch of a tree and hit him. And this, as you can imagine, left a big impact on George. He always felt that the strong always overpower the weak, and that there's nothing to be done about it. York tells George that in a way his mother has given him the power to protect those weak people and save them. George likes the sound of that, but still lowers his head and apologizes for not following York's orders. He apologizes for just being a stubborn fool. He knows it was his fault Becky and Diane died. Still, he assures York that from now on, he'll do his very best to help with the investigation and follow orders. York and George continue to sit and just enjoy listening to Carol singing on stage. And it's just then when Emily shows up in a beautiful dress. George seems confused and asks York why Emily is here. York explains that he thought he'd invite her along for drinks and they could all just relax together. This, however, seems to bother George a little bit as he makes an excuse, gets up, and leaves the two alone. York turns to Emily and asks why it is George seems so uneasy when she appeared. Emily explains to York that when she first moved to town in high school, George approached her to ask her out. She, of course, declined, but George has always felt a little bit heartbroken ever since, and he still feels a little uneasy around her. After that, the two just sit and chat for a little while longer before calling it a night and heading home. However, while back in his hotel room, York hears a knock on his door. He answers and it's Emily. She confesses that she still wanted to spend a little bit more time together, and York lets her into the room and the two continue talking about things. York opens up a little bit about his parents and that his mother was a lovely lady and that his father was part of the FBI and was actually one of the first people to do criminal profiling for the FBI. In fact, it was because of him that York also became a criminal profiler for the FBI. Emily listens to York talk, and after a little bit, she asks who Zach is, since he's always talking to him, and honestly, it's a little bit strange. This catches York off guard, but he still answers her question. York explains that Zach is his friend. He's never seen his face before, but he still discusses everything with Zach. Zach is his only friend. Emily asks when he first met Zach, and York takes a seat and tells Emily that when he was a child, he woke up late one night to the sound of screaming. He got out of bed and went to the living room to find his father pointing a gun at his mother. York remembers his father looking at him and saying, "At times, we must purge things from this world because they should not exist, even if that means losing someone that you love." After saying that, he shot his wife and then himself. And that's when Zach first appeared. He told York that he'd always be there with him and that they'd always be together and that they can always get through things together. York explains that the voice he heard from Zach calmed him and that they've been together ever since. York turns to Emily with a smile and confesses that this is the first time he's ever told anybody about Zach or his past. York explains that he joined the FBI after that to figure out why his father did what he did, to just understand it. And after that little conversation, Emily and York decide to call it a night, for real this time. The next morning, York wakes up and heads off for breakfast. As he sits reading the newspaper and enjoying a glorious cup of coffee, he begins to notice something strange. The mug he had his coffee in left a stain in the shape of a circle on the newspaper. The circle surrounding a few letters of a few words, and those letters spelling the word Harry. York, of course, takes this as a message and believes that he should now go and visit Mr. Stewart. Bless you, coffee. You're always there for us when we need you. Delicious. As York heads outside and walks towards the Driftmobile, who should be waiting for him but little old Emily? She runs up to York and thanks him for the nice night, and then asks if he knows where Thomas might be. He's supposed to be watching Nick in the holding cell back at the station, but apparently, at some point during the night, Thomas left. And speaking of Nick, he is still claiming his innocence. He's saying he didn't murder anybody. York shakes his head and explains that he has no idea where Thomas might be, but that he's probably just overwhelmed with everything and went home for the night. Emily asks York if George could possibly go out looking for Thomas, and York gives her the permission to let George go and look for him, since he's now following York's direct orders. After that, York tells Emily that he's heading off to visit Harry at his home, and then he pops into the Driftmobile and heads off for Mr. Stewart's mansion. Now, I'm actually going to skip ahead a little bit here. Essentially, Mr. Stewart won't talk to us and we need to complete a riddle, but eventually he tells York that those red seeds found in each of the victims' mouths are actually from a tree growing all over town. Once we return to him with the proof that we found the tree and the seeds, only then will he tell us anything. And what we learn from him is, well, quite a lot. It appears that these seeds, these red seeds, are connected to the cases York has worked on before, those ones from all over the United States. And again, these seeds are from this town. But what makes them so special? Well, apparently there's a legend that if you eat the seeds and then kill somebody, you'll become immortal. And it appears somebody in town or from the town is testing this legend and this theory. But that's not all. 50 years ago, the clock tower in Greenvale was built, and soon after that, a serial killer wearing a red raincoat went on a killing spree. This event was actually covered up by the US military and never made public. But how does Mr. Stewart know about this? Well, that's because he was there during those events. But he won't go into more details just yet. He wants us to go to the Greenvale Police Department to find a case file from the old sheriff who apparently kept records of that time and the event. Once we bring back that file to Mr. Stewart, he will explain more. So, York agrees and heads off to the police department to speak with George and Emily, who both think Mr. Stewart is lying, but agree to let York look for those files regardless. Besides, they're still busy looking for Thomas wherever he went, so York heads off to the records room to look for the file. However, when he gets there, the file has been stolen, and recently at that. George explains that the only person who had access to the room was Thomas. And where Thomas is a mystery. But our good old pal York isn't bothered by that. In fact, he has a plan. Coffee. Coffee will lead us to wherever the case file or Thomas is. So, York asks Emily to get him a mug of coffee, and when she does, and he takes a sip, he notices that the coffee is a souvenir mug for the local landmark, Velvet Falls. That's where the case file is. Coffee! It never ever fails you. Oh, jeez, what is going on? Oh. Anyway, after traveling to Velvet Falls and doing one very long, very terrible mandatory fishing game that made me question my life choices, we actually find the case file. Wowzers, Zach! What is this game? Anyway, while looking at the case file, the trio noticed something strange. Written down are instructions on how to gain immortality. Step 1. Make 4 sacrifices on a rainy night after eating the red seeds. Step 2. Make sure the sacrificed eat the seeds as well. And step 3. The sacrifice must not speak while being killed. York knows that who wrote this must be the killer, and George knows who, because that handwriting is Thomas's. Thomas must be the raincoat killer, and now that search for him has just become a manhunt. York returns to Mr. Stewart, file in hand, entering into Mr. Stewart's Batcave or something, and hands him the file. He looks it over and puts it down and feels now is the best time to give us the full backstory. 50 years ago, a young Harry Stewart left his house due to his parents fighting over something, which was strange because they always got along and never fought. He drove into town despite the heavy rain because he wanted to climb to the top of the newly finished clock tower in town, which is the community center, or town hall. However, when he got there, he noticed that the military was there and doing something strange. All the soldiers were wearing gas masks and were working on a strange device that pumped out a weird purple smoke. As Harry got closer, the bell on the clock tower rang for the first time, and this caused the already scared and panicked Harry to run away. However, as Harry drove into town, he noticed that all the people in town were just fighting and killing each other, blinded by fury. At first he was confused, but soon realized it must have been because of that weird purple gas. It was at this point he noticed a man wearing a red raincoat who was stronger than the rest, killing people instantly. Harry then began to feel a strange, uncontrollable rage building from within due to the gas. He picked up an object and ran towards the man in the raincoat with only one thought in mind: kill, kill, kill. However, when he got closer, he noticed the man in the raincoat was actually his father, who had a face twisted in rage, and without warning, his own father struck him down. Thankfully, this didn't kill Harry, obviously, but it did knock him out for the rest of the night. When he woke up the next day, he was surrounded by bodies. He couldn't believe what had happened and what he had done, also what his father had done. The next day, the military overran the town, issued a gag order, and forbidding anybody from talking about what had happened. And with the town being extremely patriotic, they obeyed and never spoke about it, not even with their children. Over time, the events of the night slipped into folklore, and people just stopped going outside when it rained. However, that wasn't the only thing to come out of that night. It turns out the gas actually seeped into the soil, and each time it rains, a small amount of the gas is released, hence why Mr. Stewart wears a gas mask all the time. York asks Mr. Stewart if there's some sort of connection between the red seeds and this purple gas, and Mr. Stewart nods his head and explains that he thinks that there is. Just then, all the computers within Mr. Stewart's Batcave, or whatever the heck this place is, start going crazy because apparently they have found Thomas, and it's time for York to leave. Once outside the mansion, York runs into Emily, who has sped over here to tell him all about Thomas. However, thanks to the Batcave and the computer database, or whatever Mr. Stewart was doing, he already knows they found Thomas. So Emily and York speed on over to Thomas's apartment as the rain begins to pour. Over at the apartment building, George waits for Emily and York, and once they arrive, he explains that an unknown caller phoned the sheriff's department to inform them that Thomas had returned home. York nods his head and tells the two to stay outside the apartment because he's going in alone. York slowly makes his ways up the staircase and into the house. Inside the apartment, York slowly makes his way around, but Thomas is nowhere to be found. But he was here, and recently at that. As York stands around chilling, just having a smoke, a vase shatters behind him. However, this doesn't even faze York, but it does faze Emily and George, who come running into the apartment, guns drawn, asking what that sound was. Who knew a shattering vase, or vase, could be so loud? York tells the two not to worry about it, and that Thomas isn't here, but he is close by. Emily and George then run back outside, hop into their cars, and speed off, continuing their search for Thomas. Right, so I gotta pause it here for just a quick moment and confess something to you. This moment right here, with York in the vase, I had no idea what the hell just happened. I thought it was some weird poltergeist activity or something, you know? I was so confused, but apparently this was Thomas throwing something through the window, which then broke the vase, or he shot from outside the building through the window and hit the vase to convey to York that apparently he was there? That's how York knew he was close by, or... I don't even think I still don't think I know what the heck happened. The game did not convey whatever happened very well at all. It was, you know, I just wanted to clear it up because I didn't want anybody thinking that... I mean, the game is weird enough, you know what I mean? I just didn't want you thinking that this, you know, a vase exploding was just like a normal thing, or... I don't know. I just wanted to clear it up. But anyway, let's get back to the game and the whole Thomas manhunt thing, shall we? As York hops into his trusty driftmobile and speeds down the road in the pouring rain, running over shadow people that are crawling out of the ground for some reason, he notices something strange and slams on the brakes. It's Anna. What in the world is she doing here? As York steps out of the car and follows the spirit of Anna, I just want to clear that up, through the streets, avoiding shadow people and swooping birds or crows or something. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Eventually, after way too much walking, I mean, seriously, look at this. It's... this game and its weird, slow walks, I don't understand. Anyway, she eventually leads York to the bar that Carol and Thomas own. But they aren't alone because the Raincoat Killer is here with them. He tries to kill York, but thankfully, York is able to escape into the bar. This apparently works because I guess the Raincoat Killer doesn't know how to unlock doors or just open a door or... okay. Anyway, inside the bar, after a little bit of searching around, York is able to find a hidden room. And inside this hidden room is, an adult playroom, shall we say? With adult toys and activities, shall we say? That's when York notices something. Draped around a mannequin wearing a nice latex outfit is the locket. The killer's locket. As York admires the locket, he gets pistol whipped and knocked out by Thomas. Thomas wearing a rather lovely dress. At least I think so. It brings out his eyes, you know, definitely. You go, Thomas. You go. While knocked out, York dreams about Anna, Becky, and Diane in a red room, all giggling and whispering to each other as angelic versions of the twin boys laugh along with them. Eventually, the good times, if you can call them that, must end as York wakes up, binded and bound to a chair in some sort of room. But he doesn't seem bothered by the whole situation. In fact, I don't think York's been bothered by anything so far. Anyway, back at the adult playroom, Kaysen tells Emily and George that he found this place after he watched York enter the bar. As George deals with Kaysen, Emily notices one of York's cigarettes on the ground and tells George that York was indeed here, but they have no idea how to find him. Kaysen suggests that they let his trusty doggo track York's scent. At first, George is against this idea, but Emily makes him come around. He tells Emily to go with Kaysen and to use the dog to track down York while he stays here and keeps searching for clues. After that, Emily and Kaysen head outside and commence their search all over town. And when I say all over town, I really do mean it. This is another one of those long, drawn-out moments where Kaysen's dog leads just us all over the town. Just all over the town. Ah, another long walk. Wonderful. Eventually, after a while, they end up at the community center, aka the bell tower, aka the town hall. Emily tells Kaysen to stay outside while she goes in alone. Inside the bell tower, Emily comes face to face with an old friend. That's right, the shadow lady who attacked York for stealing her can of the pickles. seems that she survived that encounter and is now here to extract revenge, I guess. But Emily is in no mood to deal with this and kills the Shadow Lady and continues her way up, very slowly, up the bell tower until she comes face to face with Thomas, who seems to be waiting for her. Emily demands to know where York is, but Thomas is too far gone. He talks about how things were much better before Emily came to town, and how he and his sister Carol only love G. And since coming to town, Emily has ruined everything. After that, he opens fire on Emily, and she is sadly forced to kill Thomas. Well, I say she is forced to kill him, but he kind of does it himself, but not really, because it was the dog. But it was him who kind of did it, sort of. It's a whole thing. The point is, Thomas is dead, and York is now free thanks to Kaysen's dog. Okay? Okay. York meets back up with Emily and thanks her for tracking him down, but asks where the killer is. Emily tells York that she sadly had to kill Thomas, but not really. And York turns to her and asks if she's out of her mind. Thomas wasn't the killer. Sure, he was part of the whole thing, but he had rock-solid alibis for the times of the murders. Not only that, but he doesn't even have the reverse peace symbol on his back. Emily is confused, but York explains that there is only one other person who had access to the files that were stolen, and that person also happens to have a name starting with G. It's George. And almost like fate, it's at that moment when George calls Emily on her radio for an update on the situation. She keeps her cool and tells him that Thomas is dead, and that York is free, and that they're both heading back to the police station for a full debrief. George sighs and tells her that he'll meet up with them back up at the office, and then ends the call. Then Emily, York, and Kaysen, for some reason, drive back to the police department. At the police department, York and Emily split up. He tells her to go round the back while he goes in from the front. Emily nods, and the two split up. Inside, the whole place is a twisted mess with shadow people all over. However, York slowly makes his way through, and eventually he and Emily meet back up and find Carol, who isn't in the best shape, having been attacked by George and her tongue removed. Emily races to her side and notices that she's writing her brother's name in blood on the ground. Emily tells Carol that she sadly had to kill her brother because he went insane. Carol then turns on Emily in anger, stuffing red seeds into her mouth. York runs over and roundhouse kicks Carol off Emily, which kills her, I think? I think it kills her? I mean, she might have just died from her injuries, but still. York picks up Emily as the red seeds start to take effect on her and make her pass out. He then runs outside, puts her into Kaysen's car, and tells him to rush Emily to the hospital for a stomach pump while he goes back inside and after George. This madness must end now. York runs back inside the police station and up to the roof where George awaits. George does what all good evil villains do and begins an epic monologue. He tells York that this town only had two good things in it: the seeds and Emily. He explains how much he loves power and the strength it brings to crush and dominate the weak, and how much he respected his mother after she pierced his cheek with her stiletto heels. None of this seems to bother York, who stands there smoking. It almost appears he's bored by it all and just zoning out of the whole situation. George, of course, doesn't like this and gives himself a red seed shower. and then begins to transform into a hulking godlike monster. Still, not even that bothers York, who's totally unfazed by everything happening. And after a brief fight between the two, George throws his axe at York, who just shoots it in midair, sending it flying backwards and into George's chest, who gets struck by lightning not once, not twice, not even 3, 4, 5 times, but 7 times. I can't make this stuff up, man. Oh, man, what? Everything's going off the rails right now. Oh, jeez. Oh, anyway, with George now toasty. Sorry, I had to throw that in. York drops to his knees and passes out. The Raincoat Killer is now dead. York awakens in the Green Vale Hospital with Usher playing a game of chess at his bedside. York asks how long he was out for, and Usher lets him know that he's been out for an entire day plus 10 hours. York nods his head and asks where Emily is because he'd like to visit her. Usher is confused. He hasn't seen Emily at all. York tells him that Kaysen should have brought her here to get her stomach pumped. Usher shakes his head and tells York that Kaysen only brought York to the hospital, along with a letter for him to read when he woke up. York takes the letter from Usher and looks at it. It appears to be a crudely drawn map, along with a key. And with that, York gets up, gets dressed, and heads out, hopping into his trusty driftmobile and racing through the rain, crashing into giant hellhounds that spawn in. I guess it really is raining cats and hellhounds. That's the correct expression, right, Zach? Whoa! Oh, jeez, Zach, look out! What's coming right for us? Drive, Jack! Drive! Whew, that was close. Oh, jeez. Eventually, York makes it to where the map was guiding him. George's house. York proceeds with caution and enters the house. Inside the house is quiet. It almost looks like nobody's even lived there for years. The windows are boarded up and everything is covered in a thick layer of dust. Still, York looks around until he finds a hidden staircase behind a wall. As York descends down and into the basement, he finds where George spent most of his time. Pictures of Emily hang all over the walls and incoherent words are etched onto those walls. But that's not all. When York proceeds a little further, he makes a shocking discovery. George's mother, dead, and for a long time by the looks of it. However, York notices something growing out of her. Red saplings. When York takes one of these saplings and holds it up to the light, he realizes there was never a reverse peace symbol. It was a tree. A red tree. Red tree. Red tree saplings. Kaysen. FK all along. As York puts the clues together, he notices something written for him by Kaysen, taunting him to come to the community center. With no time to lose, York runs out of the house to save Emily. As York travels to the community center, he has a sort of flashback, I guess? Look, I'm gonna be real with you. I have no idea what's going on right now. We play as the Raincoat Killer, but the Raincoat Killer from 50 years ago, and we rampage our way to the community center / town hall / bell tower for whatever reason, all while listening to a cover of Amazing Grace. Because I don't know about you, But when I think about praising the Lord Almighty, I think about being under the effects of some sort of toxic purple gas that turns me into a rage monster, you know? You ever get that feeling as well when you listen to Amazing Grace? Oh man, let's just sing it together, shall we? You know, you feel that, right? You feel the just that hate bubbling inside you? Man, I feel it too. Man, are we having a moment right now? I think we're having a moment right now. Anyway, the Raincoat Killer eventually reaches the community center and looks up at the bell tolling to see Kaysen and the military spewing toxic gas out of the strange machine. Now, you might be asking yourself why I broke the story to add in this flashback moment. It's because the game, I couldn't leave it out and then just add the cutscene with no context, but the game was going for a, what? Kaysen was there 50 years ago, what's going on, man? Moment, you know, and I get it. I mean, it worked for me. I was definitely saying, you know, what's going on here, but then again, I was saying that the entire playthrough. Still, the truth is I was going to cut this whole moment out, but I thought I would just leave the rough, glossed over version of it, just so we all are on the same page and have that wow moment. You know, wah! One of those. I thought I'd just clear that up right now. Let's get on with the show. Now at the community center, York notices that all the townsfolk are now under the effect of the purple gas. I guess. I don't know how, but I guess that they are. The twins run up to York, explaining that they don't know what's going on, and York promises to protect them, and as thanks, they stab him with a pair of scissors. Whoa! Uno reverse card! It turns out the children aren't spared from the effects of the gas. However, York doesn't have time to deal with this, and just runs past them all and into the building. Inside, York confronts Kaysen, who has been just happily waiting for York to arrive for 1 day and 10 hours, apparently. Emily sits passed out in the chair in the middle of the stage. Much like George, Kaysen begins his wonderful little evil person monologue, but York isn't in the mood to listen this time. Emily awakens and stands up, revealing a red sapling growing out of her. York is shocked at the sight, and that's when Kaysen giggles and explains that these red trees are actually growing this way. And then he continues to laugh and laugh as Emily steps closer to York and begs him to shoot her. York, overwhelmed by everything going on thus far, shakes his head side to side, begging and asking Zack what he should do, and then his mind breaks. York now remembers the true events of the night his father killed his mother. As a young York enters the living room and watches his father aiming a gun at Kaysen, who implanted York's mother with a red tree sapling. He begs Kaysen to remove it, but he refuses. York's mother then begs her husband to end her, claiming that if he loves her, he'll just let her die. He then trains his gun on his wife as Kaysen smiles and giggles and laughs. But he can't pull the trigger, and just then, the tree in her belly violently erupts and drains her of all her life, turning her into a husk and killing her. York's father then turns to his son and says, "At times we must purge things from this world because they should not exist, even if that means losing someone that you love. Yet, I couldn't do it. However, you can. When the time comes and you have to make the decision, make the right one. Okay, Zack?" He shoots himself. Kaysen then turns to the young child and smiles, attacking him and leaving him for dead. In that moment, York appears telling Zack he'll always be with him, and then the two people switch places. Zack now fully remembers. He isn't York. He is Zack. Emily begs Zach to shoot her. Zach trains his gun on Emily and begins to quote his father. He slowly pulls the trigger, but can't bring himself to kill Emily. And in that moment, Emily grabs the sapling and rips it violently out of herself. Zach then runs over to her as Kaysen dances and giggles around in glee, but sadly the wound is fatal and Emily slips away in Zach's arms. Zach then travels to another reality, or to a dream, or to the afterlife, or something, and then sees Emily and all the other victims, and York is there, and then Zach smiles because he knows that Emily will be forever with York, and they'll be happy together, and then Zach snaps back to reality, which I guess upsets Kaysen, who knew that I have no idea what's going on. But don't worry, it gets weirder, because Kaysen transforms into some sort of bloated monster version of himself, and then Zach has to do battle with him. And the fight is long and boring and filled to the brim with, quick time events. But eventually, Zach is able to put enough bullets into the weird balloon Kaysen, but this just upsets Kaysen more. So he transforms again into some sort of bigger frog monster thing, and then chases Zach down a long flight of stairs. I have no idea where these stairs are even going, or where they came from, or what's going on, but Zach just keeps on running for what feels like forever, only stopping now and again to press some QTE buttons. But eventually they reach another dimension? What's going on now? But just when things can't get any weirder, they do. Kaysen transforms yet again, this time into Kaysen-Zilla, and Zach whips out his trusty revolver with infinite ammo and starts unloading into a small Kaysen doll that Kaysen-Zilla is holding onto, which hurts Kaysen-Zilla, and when I say really hurts him, I mean it does, no damage at all. And after enough health is chipped away from Kaysen-Zilla, he finally shows his true form. I guess he's an evil eyeball plant tentacle monster thing. And then Zach aims his gun, fires around into the eyeball, and it explodes, and then Kaysen-Zilla finally dies, and now the town is free from the effects of the purple gas or something? I don't know what is going on. But now that Zach is back in reality, he picks up Emily's body, carries her outside, visits her in the afterlife or something, and then he gets paid by the FBI, and then he quits smoking and leaves town. The end. What? I'm not kidding you. That's what I just described to you is practically what happens, beat by beat. I'm not missing anything. Let's go on to story thoughts. Holy moly. I'm not gonna lie to you. This story is weird, especially towards the end. I left out a few things here and there. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but the truth is, no matter how well I could have explained it to you, it would not capture the weirdness or do it any justice whatsoever. You have to experience it yourself. You have to do it yourself. But that aside, let me talk a little bit about the story, at least what I understand. So, when I first started playing the game, I thought it was going to be far deeper than it actually was. I thought I was actually going to have to find the killer who was hiding among the townsfolk, you know? I was paying attention to the clues and how people were acting and talking about one another. I really went all in, and while, yeah, I wasn't fully on board with the wackiness, I did eventually get used to it. So, I was, really paying attention, I was, having a good time, I was really invested in the story, and then I got to the part of the town meeting and noticed this. This is George's license plate. And if you can't see it, it reads, "He's the one." This right here pretty much killed all the excitement and mystery I had. I mean, at first I thought, no, this has to be like a joke or a red herring, you know what I mean? Like there's no way they'd put this in here, but no, they actually did. And actually, I think it's even worse in the PC version or the Steam version or whatever. I think it reads like, "I'm the one," or something like that. Like, it's like way more on the nose, I think. I could be wrong. But anyway, look, the license plate thing isn't just for George, by the way. It's for each of the townsfolk. They have something written based on their personality on their license plate. But I mean, come on, man. Jeez. Even with all of that aside, when you really stop and think about it, a lot of things don't make sense, even knowing George is the killer. For example, the sawmill. If George was the raincoat killer all along, which he was, and York, or Zach, I suppose I should say, told him and Emily to stay outside, then how was he in the sawmill? Was that even him as the raincoat killer? Why couldn't you see his face, Was the raincoat killer inside the weird world actually the killer from 50 years ago, but as some sort of specter? Is it ever explained and I just missed it? Does it even matter? I guess not. I guess not. I could sit here all day poking and prodding the story, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter in the slightest. The story is weird, it's meant to be weird, and I think that's because it just draws extreme influence from the TV show Twin Peaks, which is also weird at times. But let's wipe all of that away for just a moment. Is the story bad? For me, it wasn't. Maybe because I've watched a lot of Japanese shows, read a lot of manga, watched a lot of anime. I don't know, but just knowing this was a Japanese-made video game, it makes all the weird paranormal twists somehow normal, I guess. Like, when I went into this at first, like I said, I was thinking serious and grounded, like season 1 of True Detective, but it wasn't like that at all. It was just unique, I guess. Still, at times I found myself lost. Like when you take control of the Raincoat Killer in the original Flashback segment, was it even a flashback? Like, when I saw that for the first time, I was actually confused. Like, was that York under the effects of the gas and he was actually mowing down people on his way to the community center? I have no idea. Again, does it even matter? Probably not, There are plenty of other things that in the game story that really just made me scratch my head in confusion. But once again, it really, really doesn't matter. I had a good time. I enjoyed the story for what it was. I was on board. Once I threw out my, my what I was expecting. Once I threw all that out the window and got on board with the weirdness, I had a fun time, But I don't know. For me, it makes it really difficult to talk about how good the story is as well, especially explaining it to you. Because like I said, this is something you have to experience on your own, at your own pace. A lot of the story, when I was explaining the story, I was just sort of being like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. It kind of always felt like that because that's actually how it was. In the game, you go through these combat sections, which sort of break up the story. It gives you time to, like, process. But when you remove those moments, and there was a lot of moments like that, especially right towards the end. When you remove all of that, the story kind of gets even weirder, as you might have been able to tell, but I like the story. I don't know what you think, and then, I don't know. I don't know. This game kind of broke my brain a little bit, so let's just, look, let's just end the story thoughts segment right here, because I think I'm broken. I think the whole thing broke me. I think. So let's move on to, I would say gameplay, but I want to get something out of the way before I move into gameplay. So let's get into some of the issues I had first. Now, I'm not going to beat around the bush on this topic. The game has some serious issues. And with it actually being on various platforms, each one of those platforms has its own unique issues and quirks. And that makes it even trickier to talk about or even suggest. As I said at the start of this video, I actually picked this game up originally on PC via Steam. And just trying to run the game, like out of the box, it was an absolute nightmare. Just the crashes alone made the 47 crashes I had in my entire 95.5 hour playthrough of Fallout New Vegas look like a joke. I logged a total of 3.3 hours in Deadly Premonition on PC, and I barely made it to the hospital segment for the autopsy before I threw in my towel. In that short time, I had a whopping total of 32 crashes. And I'd also like to point out, this game, well, for the PC, I had to disable autosaving. Not that it really helped, but I had to disable it to get it to not crash, weirdly enough. I did end up installing a patch, which did help with the amount of crashes, but it didn't fix all of them, and it had a bunch of other problems as well, like the camera being broken, and I mean, I could spend all day talking to you about how broken the camera was. I was unable to look up or down for some reason. I was sort of able to get it to work for combat, but not for the regular camera, and I mean, it was an absolute just nightmare. At the end of the day, I was forced to play the Xbox 360 version of it via backwards compatibility with an Xbox Series S. And honestly, that is a good way to play the game. If I'm going to recommend this to you, I just recommended the Xbox 360 version. However, like I said, there are multiple versions of it, and each do have their own set of issues. Like, for example, the Xbox 360 version isn't the director's cut version, and the director's cut adds extra story, and the PC version is the director's cut, and the Switch version is the director's cut. And look, there are so many other issues. I'm not going to go into it. They all have their own problems. Some people swear that the Steam version or the GOG version can run with some effort put in, but I spent hours trying to get this bad boy running, and I couldn't do it. So if you do end up going down the PC route, only buy the game on sale. I personally picked it up for sale on Steam. It was $3.74. So, I mean, that's to me, that's like a price of a Dr. Pepper. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, I'd rather have the Dr. Pepper, if I'm being completely honest. I'd rather have my $3.74 USD back so I could buy a Dr. Pepper, but that's that's not the point. That's all the advice I give to you. Extreme caution if you're going PC. Only buy it on sale. And that's it. I could go into further detail about all the issues, but I won't. You get the idea. It's bugged to hell and back, so there you go. Let's talk about the gameplay. Let's talk about gameplay now, shall we? Look, I don't have too much to say about general movement in this game, but what I will say is this. You may have been watching my footage and being able to tell something wasn't quite right. I know I'm not the world's greatest gamer, but still. This is my second biggest complaint about Deadly Premonition. It's the tank controls. I, most likely, much like yourself, was around during the early days of tank controls. I personally wasn't a big fan of them back then, and I'm most certainly not a fan of them now. I know an argument can be made for them, but let's just put that whole debate to the side. Controlling York is very sluggish. It is so unresponsive. It's not even funny. Nothing feels right. Like any game you play, you do eventually kinda get used to it, but the game will sometimes throw the curveball at you of fixed camera angles, which are they're few and far between, which is good and odd. Like, if you're gonna go for it, just go for it, you know what I mean? But there's so much wrong with this game. Thankfully, you have another mode of transportation that isn't York's legs. You've got cars. Hip hip hooray, right? Well, kinda. Driving in this game isn't much better than walking. Sure, yeah, okay, it gets you from A to B quicker. When I say quick, I use that term loosely. Anyway, look, the point is, almost every single car in this game handles extremely poorly. I wish I could just pinpoint one issue with the cars, but each car that you can drive in this game has its own set of problems. Some cars have far more weight in the front than the back, and vice versa. Some cars are quick but turn slowly, and vice versa. Some are just slow, while others are speed machines. Some are fantastic at drifting. Some drive better off-road. Some drive better on-road. Some can't drift at all. No car is perfect in this game, and I tried them all, except for York's original car. You can get it through a side mission. I tried to get it, but then the whole end game happened, and once it started, it didn't stop. So I never got to drive around in his actual car. Maybe that's the best car. I have no idea. But I never found a balanced car. Or a good car. The only good car I used was the starter police car, which you can upgrade, and it gets like a boost, which speeds you up, but the speed doesn't really increase. It's the weirdest thing, man. And just with the sheer size of the map, you're gonna really wish the boost speed actually boosted your speed really good, because it's huge. So let's look, cars equal bad, okay? In this game. Let's move on from cars and let's talk about the map a little bit, since I'm on the topic. The map is terrible. I mean, it's awful, and I really, really don't like it. To get around town, especially in the early game, you'll be using the map to figure out where to go, and, you know, get a sense of direction, right? Makes sense so far, right? Well, in most games, you can zoom in and out and have a great sense of direction. But Deadly Premonition isn't like most games. It wants to be special, and special it is. You see, the map doesn't let you zoom out all the way. It just lets you zoom out to see a slightly bigger area. And this is bad, because the town of Greenvale is huge. It's huge. So trying to figure out which road to take or what shortcut to use to get to where you want to go, I mean, it's awful. There's no other word for it, because the way to use the map, since it only shows you such small areas, you essentially have to not find the main. It's like so backwards. You have to go to find the point on the map where it is you want to go, and then pick a road next to where you want to go, follow it all the way back to where you are, and that's what gives you the sense of direction. And that's even if you can remember where you were on the map. It's like, it's so bad. All they needed to do to fix this issue was just add a full zoom in and zoom out of the map. That's it. But it gets worse. If that wasn't enough, seriously, it gets worse. You see, let's say you're cruising down the road, right? And then there's a fork in the road, but you can't remember if you're supposed to turn left or turn right. So you bring up the map again to sort of like, reorientate yourself. But then you confuse yourself even more because the map doesn't look like it did just a moment ago. And that's because the map will orientate itself based on what direction you are facing. And that makes it really disorientating. Because now you need to find where it is you need to go again and re-backtrack all the way to where you were, It was just a simple fix. It's just a simple fix. That's it. That's all it is. Just a normal map. That's all I'm asking for. Just a normal in-game map. I don't know why they did it the way that they did. Maybe it's a limitation on how big the map is and, zooming out and all that stuff. It's still really annoying. But anyways, once again, much like walking around, you'll eventually get used to driving around and the map. Well, maybe not the map, but you sort of get used to... You sort of make your own map in your head, like you figure out where each landmark is, and then, where you need, like from the bar, I know I need to take a right here, you know what I mean? Like, you actually do figure it out, kind of like the real world, you know what I mean? And maybe that's what they were going for. I don't know, but the general movement around the world, it just doesn't feel the best. You know what I mean? Maybe it's a personal preference, but I just don't like it. Especially with the tank controls, it really hinders the whole experience. It's a little bit better on PC though. Don't know why. But anyway, let's talk about the combat now. You've got two choices when it comes to combat. Melee or ranged. Now, if you go for melee, you can deal big damage, but the enemy, of course, has a far greater chance of grabbing you. The melee weapons, they're also very fragile and will break after 1, maybe even 2 uses, 3 if you're lucky. Guns, however, are a far safer choice. You might not be able to pack much of a punch, for some reason, but you are able to be far safer. Heck, even some of the guns have unlimited ammo, so there's no fear of running out of bullets. However, melee has something the gun doesn't, and that's freedom of movement. You see, when you have your gun drawn, you can't actually move around. Sure, you can strafe side to side, but if the enemy closes the distance while you're trying to set up your shot, which they will often do, and very quickly at that, your only choice is to stop aiming, quickly do a 180-degree turn, and run, which I almost never use the 180-degree turn, because strafing is useless. Once the enemy's up in your face, it doesn't matter, the strafe doesn't work. They'll still grab you. On the surface, this may not seem like a very big issue, but there were so many times when I'd run and then the enemy would just close the gap between me and just grab me. I'd prefer to have my weapon drawn and ready to go at a moment's notice. Do you know what I mean? Like, always have it pointed down, laser sight, and be able to move. But this, paired with the tank controls and some slight lag in the animations, really slow combat down and make it feel even more clunky than it already is. In fact, remember when I said tank controls were my second biggest thing that I hated about this game? Combat is the first. I really don't like the combat, and the longer the game went on, the more anger grew within me. I couldn't shake the feeling the entire time that something was wrong, and as it turns out, those feelings were spot on. The combat in this game was only added last minute. They put it in like super hastily, right before the launch, because the Japanese, I think, were afraid that it wouldn't sell in the West. At least that's what Wikipedia tells me. My theory, again, this is a theory, is that stealth was actually going to play a bigger role in the game. Part of the main story, if you remember, is learning that you can hold your breath, and then while you're holding your breath, the enemy can't see you, thus letting you you can walk right by them, right? However, in practice, this doesn't work. At least, not very well, anyways. Each level is built in such cramped, confined areas that it really doesn't allow for sneaking around. It's like so linear and so strange. I believe, and keep this in mind, this is my own theory, but I believe that the combat levels we got weren't actually in the game originally at all. I'll bet you anything those sections looked totally different. I'll bet you anything. I bet that you were meant to move around and hide and slowly make your way around, only using melee weapons in extreme cases, hence why they break so quickly. Heck, I'll even wager boss fights were different as well. As it stands, combat isn't well done at all. Like I said earlier, some guns, like your starter pistol, have unlimited bullets, so you can just go buck wild without any fear at all because you're not running out of bullets. And melee weapons are useless, especially with the final bosses. Like, you just can't use them. At least I don't think so. The final boss with Kaysen, there's no way in hell you're using any sort of melee weapon for that fight. So I wasn't a fan of the combat sections at all. For me, it just slowed everything down way too much and really got on my nerves. So that's combat. When York isn't out solving crimes, or talking to Zack about movies, or burning rubber around town, or doing that awful fishing minigame, he's often found doing side quests for the locals of Greenvale. Yes, that's right, you can do side quests in this game, which is fantastic. I loved getting to know the people in the town, and trying to figure out for myself who the killer might be. I feel that the game is actually at its best with these side quests. Now, doing them is pretty, standard stuff, I need a thing, go get my thing, and then, you know what I mean? But some of the rewards are actually well worth doing these quests. For example, 3 quest rewards are a new suit that gives you more health, which is, I actually totally forgot I even had. Probably would have came in handy at some parts of the game. The best weapon in the game, which also happens to be the best weapon for killing the final boss, which happens to be the person who gives it to you, which is funny on its own. And finally, the ability to unlock fast travel. You heard me right. One of the quests is unlocking fast travel, and this actually blew my mind. I wasn't even quite sure how to feel about it. I was so used to just Tokyo drifting my way all over town that I was 100% convinced and was even fine with the idea that this game had no fast travel. And when I finally unlocked fast travel, I was happy and sad at the same time. The funny thing is, I almost never used it after unlocking it. I only pretty much used it like right towards the end of the game when I knew I'd just be going place to place to place to place, and I got sick of the combat, you know what I mean? The gun, like I said earlier, is also really funny because Kaysen gives it to you, and I swear this has to be done on purpose because he gives you, like I said, the best weapon in the game, which is the best weapon to kill the final boss himself. Which is himself. I don't know. Overall, the side quests are really great, and I really had a good time with them. I don't think that there was any one in particular that was amazing or memorable, but I don't think that was the point. I think it was to just showcase the weird and wacky people in town, and if that was indeed the goal, I think they succeeded with flying colors. So there you go. Most of the game's soundtrack does exactly what a soundtrack should do, and that's blend into the moment and not stand out too much and, really accentuate the moment. And that's great. However, I said most, not all. Some of the songs in Deadly Premonition refuse to blend in. They refuse to bend to your rules, man. Some of these songs want to stand proud on the tallest building, butt naked, screaming, "Hear me one and all." Normally, and debatably, this is a bad thing. However, it actually works in this game. You've got such classics as FBI special agent with this jazzy trumpet, drum, and piano, and it really makes you want to introduce yourself with your full work title and full name and not give a crap if people already know who you are. You've also got Goddess. Oh, just listening to this warm melody, don't you just feel wonderful? And hey, look, if this song isn't your jam, how about Red Tree Ambient version? I bet you feel the danger now. Huh. Oh hey, did you just tell a funny joke? Well, I bet you're gonna want to have Comic Relief playing. Those piano beats will really draw attention away from the awkward silence growing due to the fact that your joke was actually terrible. Or, of course, who could forget the song that you've most likely heard before but had no idea where it came from? Life is Beautiful. Oh, yeah! I mean, life really is beautiful. Just listen to that whistling. Breathe it in with your ears, pals, because, I mean, you're gonna hear this song a lot. Oh yes, a whole heck of a lot. So often you'll find yourself whistling this tune in the shower as loud as you can until your wife bursts into the bathroom screaming at you that she can't stand it anymore and she wants a divorce. Yeah, I mean, what a great song. I can hardly feel the crippling depression now because that kazoo just kicked in. Life is beautiful. Okay, jokes aside, I'm not kidding about some songs standing out, but trust me when I say that they do stand out. And like I said, normally this would be a negative thing, but something strange happens. Soon you'll find yourself loving rather than hating the songs. I don't know why, but it's true. At the start of the game, I actually wrote down a note, and the note said, some of the music is annoying. And I kept that feeling for like the first hour or two, but slowly found myself humming the tunes to myself or tapping my foot, and before I knew it, I was in love with the music. The music is part of the charm of the game. It's like when somebody tells you a bad joke. Make no mistake, the joke is bad, but the person just keeps on repeating the joke over and over throughout the day or week or month, and then you find yourself actually laughing by the end because that's the joke. It's bad, you know what I mean? There are some, of course, great songs, and some of the other ones are bad. For example, I didn't even bring up, I did, The Amazing Grace. But there is one song that I didn't like, and it plays a lot. And brace yourself, Deadly Premonition fans, because this one might sting a little. Miss Stiletto Heel. For some reason, this one just never clicked with me. I'm not sure why. Maybe it'll grow on me if I, replay the game, but for some reason or another, it didn't gel with me, you know? I don't know, you'll have to tell me if you liked this song or not. There is one song that made me lose it. I was laughing as I was playing. However, I can't find the name of the song or even the track itself. So here's the moment where it plays in-game. I don't know what it is about that song, but it just had me laughing, and it's another reason why I wish I had my microphone recording while I was playing games, because I was crying. I just lost it. I don't know why. Oh, there's also one thing I want to say about music. When you're driving around town, depending on which car you get into, each car has its own song that will just play on repeat. So maybe that helps drill some of the songs into your brain. I don't know. Personally, I think it's a bad choice to have each car just play one song on loop. Like, I wish you could switch between the songs on the in-game radio or something, but... anyway, that's all I had to say about music. Let's talk about a few random things. Much like I did in my Fallout 4 video, I had a few random things I wanted to talk about, but I couldn't find a place to put them, so I just shoved them into this little segment here. So, number one is, the game actually appears to run in real time, which was surprising when I first noticed it. Now, I'm not 100% sure if it's actually real time, or just really close to it, but it feels like real time. Like, one real life hour is one in-game hour. So that's, I don't know, and that can affect some of the side quests, because only some of the side quests are available at some of the times, and you can speed up time by smoking, but anyway, that's it. Number two is York's appearance actually changes as you play. I mean, it doesn't actually change per se, but he does do things like grow a beard as time passes, and you can shave it off or let it grow, whatever. He can also put on different suits, and that changes how he looks. And there's an in-game reason for the suit wearing thing, like his suits do become dirty and attract flies. I don't think it does anything. Like, I don't think it affects the gameplay in any way. I could be wrong, but some of the suits do good things. Like, they'll give you like that health buff, like I said earlier. I think there might be other buffs as well, but if there were, I didn't notice them. Either way, I thought that was pretty interesting. The third thing is food and sleep. As time goes on, York will get hungry and tired, and you need to make sure he eats and sleeps. At first, I thought this was going to be like a sort of hardcore feature, you know, like real time, real distance driven, you know, like stuff like that. I thought it was going to be like something hardcore, and I'd be doing a lot of it, but no, not really. I think what they were going for here is like trying to like limit the amount of time you spend doing side missions or spending time in the other world or whatever it was. But it's just, it's actually very pointless. I found so much food in the other world or around the just regular world that it was an absolute joke. You know, like right at the end of the game, when you're in the final boss fight, in the final overworld, and you're running away from Kaysen, you'll find, like, food. There's no point in eating right now. I don't know. It was very, very strange. I don't know, but I'd be looking for ammo or healing items, but struggle to find those, but man, if I needed to find, you know, pickles or something, you know, they were there. It actually, it's even funnier because some of the food sources that you find are just infinite. So you could just pick up as many lollipops or pickles or, I don't know, turkey sandwiches or whatever. So, I don't know, it was just very weird, but, oh well. Number 4, exploring. Like I said, the game map is huge. It's stupidly big, and so naturally you'd think that maybe there were like some hidden items or collectibles or suits or so on or so forth. You know, that you'd be rewarded for exploring, but no, not really. The only hidden items is money, and I never ever ran out of it, so I don't know. There's also cards you can collect, but they're marked on your map, so no, you know, no exploring. I don't know. I always get upset when a game has like this beautiful world to explore and you don't get anything for exploring. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you walk around like a path somewhere and it's just a dead end and you're like, what the hell? You know what I mean? Like, why did you put that in? You know, you just wasted my time. What? But anyway, number 5, it may be the greatest thing in any video game, the ability to peep into windows. You heard me right. You can actually, like, stare in people's houses and watch them. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, "Ugh, that's creepy. Surely you'd be punished for such a dirty deed, you dirty, dirty boy." However, you'd be totally wrong. In fact, you're actually rewarded for doing it with cash money. Ka-ching! So, I don't know. I won't lie. I spent a lot of time peeping through people's windows. Just staring at them. Because I thought it would help the case, you know? I thought I'd creep up to a window, you know, and peer in and overhear somebody arguing and maybe catch them disposing of evidence or something like that. You know what I mean? Like at a particular day, at a particular time, X town person will go to X location, and if you don't look through the window at that particular time, you'll miss a crucial piece of evidence. But no, none of that. There's only a few things to see. Most of it is garbage, but like you can see, like, I don't know, like Emily watching movies or working out, maybe somebody cooking dinner, but that's about it. Nothing else, really. That's it. But yeah, speaking of that being it, that's it for all the random things I wanted to talk about. So let's move on to my final thoughts and wrap this surprisingly long video up. Oh, man. Let me be real with you here, and straight up answer the big question of, should you play Deadly Premonition? Maybe. You see, I can't actually, in my right mind, recommend this game at all. But I also can't not recommend it to you. There is so much about this game that makes answering that question pretty tricky to do. I wanted to bring this up earlier and not at the end because I feel like answering the question and then answering why I felt maybe, it just warranted a deeper discussion. So I just wanted to make that clear from the start. Should you play Deadly Premonition? Maybe. Deadly Premonition is a very special game. There is no denying it. You will either straight up love it or hate it, and I don't think there'll be an in-between. I can totally see what the developers were going for, but you need to see it through... You need to see the game through the broken aspects of it. The game is broken. Make no mistake. There are strange musical and audio choices, stiff animation, questionable voice acting, the odd moments sprinkled throughout the game, and I think all of those combined is what makes this game so special. I don't know I kind of know a little bit of what happened behind the scenes, but I would wager this wasn't the game they actually wanted to make at all. Like, even at its release, this game didn't look good. It didn't play well compared to other games of its time. That's why I think that I don't think this was what they wanted. I think the best way to truly sum up Deadly Premonition is those so bad it's good movies. You know, real actors, directors, and writers all doing their darndest and putting their heart and soul into something, but because they lack the budget or just true experience and talent, the end product is so bad it's good. You know what I mean? Like The Room or Samurai Cop or whatever. You know, those movies. I really believe that's just how Deadly Premonition ended up. I don't think a lot of the jokes, odd animation, the bizarre audio choices, I don't think it was done on purpose. I think that's just the way it ended up, due to lack of money, time, or just general skill. However, because of that heavy inspiration from Twin Peaks, I think it all kind of works, if that makes sense. I honestly believe that if this game lacked that Twin Peaks inspiration, and it was just like a regular game, I think it would be bad. I think we'd all be mocking this game. I think it would be like, worst game of X year. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think the Twin Peaks works in its favor to add to that bizarreness. Like, when I first started playing this game, I had never watched Twin Peaks. I mean, sure, I'd heard about it, and I knew about how surreal it could be, but that's about all I knew. At first, I was frustrated with the controls, and the jokes didn't land, but eventually I found myself smiling, or laughing at the jokes, or the music, and I wasn't expecting that. I gave in to the weirdness, and ended up actually having a fantastic time with the game. But I can so easily see somebody else not having that experience, and just straight up hating this game, for all the very reasons why I and other people liked it. It's why I can't actually truly recommend people should or shouldn't play this game. Now, with all of that said, there is something else I need to bring up, and that is its sequel. Now, normally I personally do my best to look into a game's franchise or whatever to see if it has spin-offs or sequels or whatever. I like to do that to keep a sort of organization. That's why when I view a series of games, I do, like Fallout 1, 2, 3, 4, Elder Scrolls 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's why I do that. The spin-offs don't matter so much because they're like spin-offs, they're like one-shoot things and I can come back to them later. But I like to try to keep things organized. I didn't do it for this game because, truth be told, I assumed that there was no way in hell this game would have ever gotten a spin-off or a sequel. I thought it bombed and that it was just lost to history. It was just a cult classic. That's it. I genuinely thought of that. But I guess the joke's on me because Deadly Premonition 2, A Blessing in Disguise, is a real thing that really happened. I won't be covering the sequel, at least not yet. For starters, I don't even own it. It's like, and I didn't know it was a thing until I was actually writing this script. I will eventually get around to it, but not for a little while yet. Like, I think I need a bit of a break. But, and this is where I think things could get fun, I'm going to make a prediction, and I'm going to call back to this moment when I do cover Deadly Premonition 2. And I want you all, if you've played it, I don't want you to spoil it. I don't want you to confirm my theories and my prediction. I don't want any of that. No spoilers. None of it, even though I'm pretty sure someone will do it. I don't want it. So, my prediction is that the sequel is going to be bad. Like, actually bad. Now, I genuinely don't know a thing about the game, besides its name, and that it was only released on PC and Nintendo Switch. But I'll bet whoever was involved in the making of that game looked at what people liked about the first game and just tried to recreate it. But in doing so, failed because, and I think the best way to describe what it is I'm about to be talking about is, again, bringing up those so bad it's good movies. So, there is a movie called Samurai Cop. If you've seen it, good on you. It falls into that so bad it's good category of film. Well, many years later, they actually made a sequel to that film, but the movie failed to recapture what was so good about that film. You cannot recreate genuine passion. You cannot recreate somebody who believes they are doing the greatest thing on earth and failing. You cannot recreate that. It's just not something that can be done because it's lightning in a bottle. The team behind the first game, I believe, like I said, honest to God tried. Like, they did everything to the best of their ability and everything. But all those weird quirks is what makes it special. And trying to recreate that, I don't think you can recreate all the weird, bizarre moments because that stuff wasn't done on purpose, you know what I mean? So that's what I think. But I guess I'll find out eventually. And I'll be actually kind of looking forward to seeing if I'm right, to be completely honest. But that about wraps it up for me. But, before I go, I want to give special thanks to all the people who have undergone the great joining and joined the channel and become a member of the Lycan colony. So, I'd like to thank, as always, Family Dog, Ben M, Anya the Khajiit, David Welsh, or Welch, Amelia, TJ and Jack, Needy, and 2 new members to undergo the great joining. Pizza Rolls, who actually did it live while I was streaming Starfield. Thanks again, Pizza Rolls. And Adam Myers, who was the latest person to do it. So thank you very much, Adam. Thank you very much, Pizza Rolls. Thank you once again. I really, truly mean it from the very bottom of my heart and my soul. So thank you very much to everybody, especially if you're watching this right now. Because I'm pretty sure people just peace out as soon as the I'm done part happens. But I like doing this part because it helps me, it lets me tell you what's coming up next and what you can look forward to. And if you were following the community posts, you'll know that I put up a poll asking if you wanted me to do The Witcher series next or Baldur's Gate series next. Because I keep hearing about Baldur's Gate 3 and I want to check it out. But anyway, the winner of that was Baldur's Gate series. So I'll be playing Baldur's Gate, but not only will I be playing Baldur's Gate and making videos on it, I will be doing it live here on YouTube. I will be streaming the whole gosh darn thing, and you can come by and you can yell and scream at how bad I am playing Baldur's Gate and telling me I'm not doing the meta and I'm not min-maxing and you hate me and I smell. You can come by, or you can, just like this game, give into the madness and just have a wonderful time. And I'm hoping it's gonna be the latter. I hope you're gonna have a wonderful time. But that's what's happening next. Baldur's Gate will be the next series. It might take a while. I think Baldur's Gate is a long game. I think it's like really long, and the story is like really long. So that's gonna be a long video and a long time. But there'll be more videos because I'll be streaming it, so you can just watch those or watch the VODs or whatever. Anyway, I'm done. This video is far too bloody long. I'm done. I'm going to have dinner, and then I'm going to get straight back to work editing this video and the chaos, because it's taken me so damn long to get this out, and I apologize, work and life and it'll get easier. One day it'll get better. Alright, take care, be safe, I love you, and peace out, pals. Bye.